Hi, welcome back to Lawyerist Lens. Today we're going to talk about one of the most common questions that lawyers have early on when they're starting a law practice, which is how to figure out what your hourly rate ought to be. Now, let's just get this out of the way. You will have heard by now, if you have been reading Lawyerist, listening to our podcast, or watching these videos, that we don't necessarily think hourly rate is the right way to go about billing your clients. It rewards inefficiency. It caps the amount of revenue that you can bring in to the amount of time you're willing to put into your practice, and it might or might not be responsible for a lot of the problems that lawyers have with stress and anxiety and money problems. So it's at least worth considering whether or not the hourly rate is the best way to charge for the kind of work you're doing. But whether or not an hourly rate is the best way to charge, it's useful to understand the value of your time, both the actual value of your time compared with what you need to make, and the value of your time in the marketplace. So let's talk about that a little bit, because no matter what, you should have an idea of how much time you're putting in and what you're actually realizing on that time. So here's how to calculate your hourly rate. Step one, work backwards from what you need to bring home. That is, after taxes, how much money do you need to bring home to satisfy your goals for your life and career? Now, maybe that's $50,000 because you're frugal and you don't have a lot of student loan debt and you feel like you can get by on that. Maybe it's $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 because there's a lifestyle that you feel like you have to have in order for this business to be worthwhile, or you've got 10 kids, or who knows what. It's okay, be realistic, but whatever your take-home pay needs to be, start from that. And then add your taxes back in. So if you need to bring home $100,000, then you're going to be paying about 30% more in taxes. So you'll need about $130,000 in revenue in order to get that. But we haven't accounted for expenses, so you also need to add your expenses back in. So you can make an estimate of what your expenses for your firm are going to be, and that includes salaries. So if you have independent contractors or employees, you need to add those back in as expenses too. You also need to account for the fact that you can't work all the time. I think it's reasonable to estimate that if you're working 9 hours a day, you're going to be able to bill 3 of those hours. And that's true whether or not you're billing by the hour. You're going to actually be able to do productive work that you can get somebody to pay you for about 1/3 of that time. It does depend on what size firm you have and what kind of scale you can take advantage of. But really, those advantages of scale don't kick in until your firm is like 10 to 15 lawyers large. And so anything less than that, it's about 1/3. So you need to account for that too. And now we need to account for the number of hours you are reasonably going to work. If you need to work 80 hours a week, is that really where you want to be? And if you want to work every week out of the year, is that really where you want to be? So you need to figure out how much you reasonably want to work. And now you can take all those numbers and crunch them, and you will wind up with what your minimum hourly rate needs to be in order to get you to your goals at the level of expenses that you are likely to have with the amount of work you are willing to do. And that should give you a floor. Now, there's a convenient calculator on our website for this so that you don't have to just do the math from listening to me talk right now. But, so use that, and that sets a floor for you about what your hourly rate has to be in order to meet your goals. So should you only charge the minimum? Well, you can, but what you also need to do, because you don't even know if the minimum is reasonable, what you also need to do is ask around. Find out what other lawyers in your practice area, in your community are charging. Clio has also put together an hourly rate trend report so that you can find out what lawyers in your practice area, in your area, are charging who are Clio customers. But you can also just go out and ask in your community, what are other lawyers charging? Because you need to get a sense for this. Like if your minimum hourly rate to hit your goals is $500 an hour and everybody in your community is charging $200 an hour, that's not realistic. You need a really compelling story to tell in order to charge $500 an hour, or you need a different business model that allows you to leverage something other than time to get paid so that your effective hourly rate goes up. So you need to understand where your minimum hourly rate fits within the community. The other reason you need to know is because if your minimum hourly rate is $100 an hour less than what lawyers in your community are charging, well, that gives you a lot of cushion in case you want to market yourself by undercutting other lawyers. Well, yay, you don't need to make as much as they are, so you can undercut them if you want. Or you can bill what they're at and get to your goals a heck of a lot faster. And whether or not you're going to charge by the hour, now you know if you're going to bill flat fees, for example, you can still take the amount of money that you're bringing in and divide it by the hours that you're working and arrive at your effective hourly rate. And now your minimum is that effective hourly rate. So the other reason you want to know this is so that when you calculate how much money you're bringing in and divide it by the number of hours you're working, you can find out what your effective hourly rate is and compare that to the calculation that you already did to find out if you're above or below it. Are you hitting your targets or not? And could you be doing better with a different billing model? Is your business, your client service model successful? Is it effective? And are you getting what you need to out of it? And that all works from working back from how much money you need to take in. And you can adjust your expenses, you can adjust some other things, but that's how you figure out what your hourly rate needs to be. Figuring out what your minimum is, comparing it to the marketplace, and then reflecting down the road about what you're actually earning. Thanks for tuning in this week. Before you leave, please hit the subscribe button and hit that bell so you get notified of new episodes. We'll be back next week.